Today I'm going to talk about the story of my mother. So
Okay.
last Sunday is Mother's Day. Actually, it's eighth year Mother's Day without the mother. My mother passed away 2013. So on that Mother's Day, and I wrote something about my mother. I say that my mother, the title is My Mother is an Angel. So every year, Mother's Day, I always wrote some story about her. And when I started my story, I say the first thing is that not because she's my mother, so that's why I call her Angel. And in fact, and she is an angel. And I still don't know until today. I think this Mother's Day, I didn't write anything. I just posted some pictures. And because the day before, I had a dream, and she come into my dream. And I asked her, I said, every year I write something about you and your story. Are you happy about that or not? And she said, you know what? God knows everything. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to say anymore. I say, really? So that's why I wake up. I say, Mom, don't leave. I have a question for you. And she said, what question? You always ask a question. You're still the same little girl. I say, yeah, my question is, I write about you. I say that the title is, your story is My Mother is an Angel. Are you a real angel from heaven, or you become an angel and go over there? So my mother smiled and she said to me, she said, well, you will find out by yourself. And then she left. So I woke up, so I decided that maybe this year I'm not going to write anything. So I just looking for some pictures. I found the one picture. I was 6 years old. My mother 36. And the place I live in Shanghai, next door, is an eye clinic. So that year, I think it's 1958, and they tried to have a campaign and post some pictures to against the one of the eye diseases was very popular in China, and especially to the children, so may cause a blind. And so the picture, it's a series of pictures, and because they saw my mother would carry my hand when walking, so hey, we need somebody to do as a model. So like I had to wash my hand, they take a picture, and the mother would give me eye drops, they take a picture. So that's the one picture left. It's still very good pictures because it's done by a professional photographer. And the last picture I found is the last year. It was 2013, and she was in nursing home. And that time she already lost an ability to speak. And she was holding a teddy bear. I just hold her, and she hold the teddy bear very tight, because when she lost her the function of her speech, and she always gestures something to me, and like she see her coming, and she hold the teddy bear very high, and then point to me and point her. So I say that, is that you means you love me? And when I was a child, you hold me just like you hold a teddy bear. She was knocking her head, So each time it always make me very touched, because, people, when they're getting old and may lose their speech, especially last lingo around those years. And but they still actually, even they cannot say the words, but they still have lots of things to say. So I think that, always had to try to communicate it with them, and to say something what they wanted to say, just still make kind of communications, and especially the love, love never die, and you always can express in different forms. And so I took these two pictures, and the other picture during those years, and posted in the internet. That's a place in which I always send articles about my mother's story. So some people, they saw it, and my friend, and they just respond to me, said, how come no story this year? And I said, well, I had a dream. So I write about a little bit about the dream. I said, that's why I didn't write a story. Maybe God knows everything. I really don't have to say more. Maybe that's advice from my mother, you know. And then, and some people, one of my friends, I think she used to work for Stanford. She told me, she said, I wanted to tell you something. She said, I have a friend, and she wrote a book about her mother and also her stepmother, and two books. And did ever you read that? I said, no, I didn't. So he sent it to me. So I read about it. You know, those two mothers, her two mothers, they are communist officers, very high rank officers. And so I thought it was, you know, some kind of a memoir, and for how much their mother loved them or whatever it is, you know. But just after I read it, I was shocked, because the first book is about he said, I have such a mother, and that's the title. I said, what kind of such a mother? And it said that how her mother was absolutely no feeling and for her children. And the relationship is strictly class struggle, because the mother think, you know, all her life is dedicated to Communist Party, and they supposed to devote everything, and how they can relate it to the family, marriage, children, and had to put the party's interests first. Had to use the Mao's guidelines to evaluate it. Their husband and their children is, you know, the comrade or the enemy, or by how they devoted to the party, how they, you know, follow the Mao. If not, they are immediately becoming enemy. I was shocked, you know, because later I called my friend. I said, do you know that this woman, and her father is very high-ranking Chinese officer in the Chinese party, and so she is like after she wrote the book in Chinese, of course, and so it's a lot of comments, because they say that it call her traitor or everything else, and how dare you describe your mother and tell the truth about your mother is, you know, Chinese Communist Party, how to make a human being become evil, you know. So that, I think, later on, Mr. Olson will talk about ratification. So that was a start with in Yan'an in 1941, when Mao, after the Long March, they arrived in the inner area of in China, and they started their revolution, the party. So actually, he took the power of the party and started all kind of movements. Ratification is one of the famous one. They make everybody, all the Chinese Communist Party members, and becoming and basically no longer a human being. You know, just like Nan said, you know, they're against and all the humanities. And if you are human and you love your children or your husband, they immediately become guilty, and because you didn't put the party's interest in the first. And so I wanted to talk about my mother. And of course, she's not a Communist Party member, just opposite. She comes from so-called class enemies. family. And my grandpa, and he graduated in missionary school and then go to the St. John University in Shanghai, and later on and study and business in the London Business School. So basically, he's a Western educated person. He coming back and have a partnership with the British and American, and build those resorts in Beijing, because in Beijing summer is very hot, so they need build some resort in the mountains, so much cooler. And so I think they have 7 hills in that area near Beijing. So he had a partner with American and British. They built 7 resorts, all Chinese architecture. And now the only one left, and also totally renovated. And so my mother's come out that kind of family. And so it's very unusual. And she's not just an educated woman, also her father, she's the first daughter in the family, so her father sent her to a French school in Beijing. And, that time in China, for the girl, and send her to the French school is very unusual. So she's very, very lucky, I would say, right? So born to the family, they have a privileged life. But that life was shortened very fast. And when she was 15 years old, and something very, very bad things happened to her. Today, I don't think I have time to talk about that story. And I want to talk about is the one story, which was when I escaped from Yunnan, and and because the Communist Party officer in my workplace was trying to sexually assault me. And then I fight with him and injured him, and then therefore put me in jail, and then I escaped to Shanghai. And so for 3 years in my own home, I'm like a fugitive, because in China you had to have your resident permit, and otherwise you're illegal. And you not just not get food, and also they will evict you, immediately arrest you. Actually, they did try to send a police officer to my home to search everything. And of course, my parents, all neighbors, nobody turned me in to the police department. So at least at that time, I still, the people I still believe faith in a human being. So still have a lot of nice and decent people, right? And I said, but I needed to get my permit back. If Yunnan, they agreed to let me go, so eventually I can apply resident permit in Shanghai. So, but that's a very, very difficult thing. So I'm talking about my mother. My mother is a very, very gentle woman. And all her life, most of the time, she's a housewife. Of course, she also volunteered herself to teach in the school or something like that. And but basically, she's a homemaker and taking care of my brother and I. We have 3 kids in the family. She's a very gentle person. I don't never see her argue with people or whatever. And but at that time, and she said that she's gonna go there, fight the battle, get my resident permit back. And so it's like an impossible mission for her to do it, because everybody thinks she's useless because she's weak, she's gentle. Normally we would think the woman and strong woman, and they're not gentle. They are outspoken or whatever. But that's what I'm talking about. I think that last couple of weeks ago, and we had the show with David Master. We talked about Lawyer Master. I think one of the clips they play is they're saying is no strong woman and the only weak man. So lots of American women and even men would think that this is anti-woman or something like that. But I have a different interpretation for that because the Chinese traditionally, a woman, a mother, a wife, a woman is gentle. But they not really weak because my mother showed it to me that time, and that she is at least qualified for a soldier to fight any battles, but for love and her unconditional love to me, and that she had to go. And then she decided if it didn't get that back, and she never ever come back home. You know what's happened? She was there for 8 months, and I don't know how they humiliated her every day. And different level of the governments, just kick her around everywhere. But she never give up. She really showed to me, and that she's the strongest soldier, I think, in the world. Is a really brave woman. The inner strength, for me to understand that a person is, you're gentle, but doesn't mean you don't have the inner strength. You have the inner strength. You can fight. You really can win the battle. And she did. So all because unconditional love, mother's love. That was for me to recognize her. Because people will say, okay, you will know your mother. Actually, I don't know. Because in the communist regime, I get brainwashed. I always want to be a revolutionary. I always told myself, I never want to be like my mother and be a housewife, be a gentlewoman. I want to be a revolutionary, right? And that time, I really realized who is my mother. And I realized, and she is an angel. I also have other stories, too. But today, I just talk about a little bit of this. And then I think Mr. Olson will talk about how and the ratification and make a Communist Party member, including women, and becoming totally non-human. So
you have set the stage for our future discussion with Michael Olson. Amy, as always, your story. I have goosebumps actually listening to your story today. It's amazing.
Mother's Day story.
Mother's Day story, but a whole nother perspective. Wow. Well,
I didn't talk about the other mother. I was talking about how that she becoming the tool of the communism, and how she treated daughters like a class enemy. And we get that later, maybe next week. So I wanted to listen how did this start, this 1941, the ratification of the Communist Party.